The mining colony on Kepler 186f didn't have a proper name, just a designation: Extraction Site Theta 7. It sat in a valley between rust-red mountains, a collection of prefabricated structures and industrial equipment designed for function, not comfort. The air was breathable but thin, requiring genetic adaptation or supplemental oxygen for most species. The work was brutal, the pay was minimal, and every 3 months, when debt collectors arrived, desperate people lined up to sell away their freedom. David Harrison stood at the edge of the labor auction, his arms crossed, watching with barely controlled disgust. He'd come to Theta 7 6 months ago as a hydraulic systems engineer for Meridian Mining Corporation. Good pay, advancement opportunities, a chance to build something. What they hadn't mentioned in the recruitment materials was the human cost of keeping extraction quotas. The auction took place in the colony's largest structure, a warehouse normally used for equipment storage. Today it held platforms, registration desks, and rows of people waiting to be purchased like spare parts. Platform 7 held a woman who made David stop in his tracks. She was Aranai, a species he'd only read about in xenobiology texts. Tall, maybe 6.5 feet, with skin that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue depending on the light. Her hair was long and white, pulled back in a practical braid. Her eyes were completely black, no visible iris or pupil, giving her an otherworldly appearance that was both beautiful and unsettling. She wore the standard gray coveralls of debt laborers, worn thin at the knees and elbows. Around her neck hung a digital placard that scrolled information in multiple languages. Sera of Aranai prime asterisk debt, 8,000 corporate credits category, general labor asterisk minimum bid, 5 credits duration, 18 months contracted service 5 credits. David did the mental math. That was less than a week's worth of meal vouchers. Less than the cost of replacing a faulty valve in the hydraulic systems he maintained. A person's freedom for 18 months, valued at 5 credits. Sera stood with her shoulders back, her expression carefully neutral. But David noticed her hands, four-fingered like most Aranai, were clenched so tightly that the purple of her knuckles had gone almost white. A mining supervisor named Torrance approached the platform, datapad in hand. He was human, middle-aged, with the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile decades ago. "What can she do?" he asked the auctioneer, not bothering to address Sera directly. The auctioneer, a krill with gray scales and too many teeth, consulted his records. General labor, excavation experience, good physical condition. Aranai physiology adapts well to low oxygen environments, no supplemental breathing required. Meal costs are lower than human standard. Torrance nodded, calculating. Any medical issues? None on record. Previous contracts, 2, both completed without incident. David felt his jaw tighten. They were discussing her like equipment specs. He'd heard this language before in classified briefings during his 3 years in the Colonial Engineering Corps. Asset management, resource allocation, human, or in this case, Aranai capital. He'd left the Corps because of language like that. Torrance was about to make a bid when David stepped forward. "I'll take her." The supervisor turned, surprised. "Harrison, you're not registered as a labor contractor. I'm registered as senior engineering staff. Check the colony charter, section 12, subsection 4. Senior staff are permitted to contract personal assistance for specialized work." The auctioneer's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. "That's technically correct." "Though unusual, is it legal?" David asked. "Yes." "Then I'm bidding 5 credits." Torrance's eyes narrowed. "You don't need an assistant. You work alone. My work requirements have changed." David kept his voice level, professional. "Do you have a competing bid?" A long pause. Torrance could bid higher, 6 credits, 10, whatever he wanted. But David was senior staff, and picking fights with engineering over a 5-credit laborer was more trouble than it was worth. "Fine, she's yours." Torrance walked away, already moving to the next platform. David approached the registration desk, pulling out his credit chip. The transaction completed in seconds. 5 credits transferred, contract registered, Sera's information now linked to his employment record. Sera watched him approach the platform with those unsettling black eyes, trying to read him, trying to figure out what kind of person he was. Another supervisor who'd work her to exhaustion, someone with worse intentions. The careful neutrality of her expression held, but David saw the tension in her shoulders. He stopped at the base of the platform steps. "Can you walk?" he asked, his voice gentler than he'd used with the auctioneer. "Yes." Her voice was deeper than he expected, with a subtle harmonic quality. Aranai vocal cords produced overtones that gave their speech an almost musical quality. Do you need anything before we leave? Water, food, medical attention? She blinked, clearly not expecting those questions. No, I'm functional. Functional, the word choice told him everything about how she'd learned to think of herself. Okay, let's get out of here. David gestured toward the exit, then waited for her to descend the steps. He didn't reach for her arm or try to guide her. She was contracted to him legally, but he had no intention of treating her like property. Sera walked down carefully, her movements precise despite her obvious exhaustion. Up close, David noticed details the platform lighting had hidden: the faint scars on her hands from mining work, the way her coveralls hung loose on her frame suggesting recent weight loss, the careful way she held herself as if conserving energy. They walked together through the warehouse and out into the colony's main thoroughfare. The sky above was a pale orange, Kepler 186f sun lower and redder than Earth's. The air was cool and dry, carrying the metallic tang of processed ore. Sera walked beside him, not behind, though she kept glancing at him as if expecting him to correct that. When he didn't, some of the tension in her shoulders eased fractionally. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My quarters, you'll stay there." Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I see." David heard the assumption in those two words. "I have a spare room," he said carefully. "You'll have privacy and a locked door." "I'm not," he paused, choosing his words. "I didn't contract you for anything except getting you away from that platform." She stopped walking. "I don't understand. I saw you standing there being discussed like equipment, and I couldn't walk away. So I bought your contract with one intention: to make the next 18 months as bearable as possible while we figure out how to get you out of it entirely." Sera's black eyes searched his face. "Why would you do that?" "Because I've seen what happens when people become numbers on spreadsheets. I don't like it. You're human." "Yeah, humans run this colony. Humans created the debt system. Humans profit from contracts like mine." David nodded. "Some humans do. I'm trying not to be one of them." She absorbed that, clearly skeptical but also confused. "What do you want from me in return?" "Right now, I want you to eat something real, get cleaned up, and sleep in an actual bed. Tomorrow we'll talk about the rest." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now." They started walking again. The colony's residential sector was a cluster of modular units stacked 3 stories high. David's quarters were on the second level, Unit 214, marked only by a small nameplate beside the door. He keyed in his access code and the door slid open with a soft hiss. "Welcome to palatial accommodations," he said with mild sarcasm. The quarters were larger than standard miner housing but still modest: a main living area with a small kitchenette, a workbench covered in mechanical parts and diagnostic equipment, and 2 doors leading to separate rooms. A wide window showed the valley and mountains beyond, the view somewhat compensating for the utilitarian furnishings. Sera stepped inside slowly, taking in the space with the same careful attention she'd given everything else. Her eyes lingered on the workbench, the technical manuals scattered around, the half-disassembled hydraulic pump on the counter. "You actually are an engineer," she said. "Did you think I was lying? I thought it might be a cover story." She turned to face him. "Masters sometimes pretend to be something they're not, makes the contracted feel safer before revealing true intentions." The casual way she said "masters" made David's chest tighten. "I'm not your master. Legally, I'm your contractor. Practically, I'm just someone who couldn't leave you on that platform." "There's no just about that." Sera moved to the window, pressing one hand against the glass. "Do you know what happens to Aranai who go through 3 contract cycles?" "No. We stop being Aranai. We forget our language, our customs, our sense of self. We become whatever shape our masters need." Her reflection in the glass was ghostly, purple skin against orange sky. "I'm on my 3rd cycle. I can feel it happening. Parts of me are already gone." David set his bag down on the workbench. "What parts?" "I used to sing. Aranai are singers. Our language is half melody. I haven't sung in 2 years. I've forgotten how." Her voice carried no self-pity, just statement of fact. "I used to believe in the eternal song, the Aranai concept of spiritual connection. That's gone too." "Hard to believe in connection when you're treated as property. Then we'll start getting those parts back," David said. "Starting now." She turned from the window. "You're serious?" "Yes, you'll be punished if the corporation finds out you're not using me for labor." "Let me worry about that." David walked to one of the doors and pushed it open. "Bathroom, shower works, water's hot, pressure's decent, towels are in the cabinet." He opened the second door. "Bedroom, it's yours. Lock works from the inside, old-fashioned mechanical bolt, no override." Sera stared at the bedroom like it was a trap. Where will you sleep? Couch in the main room. It converts to a bed. That doesn't make sense. You're the contractor. You should take the comfortable space. Comfort isn't just about furniture, it's about feeling safe. You need that more than I do right now. David moved to the kitchenette. Are you hungry? I shouldn't be. They fed us this morning. That's not what I asked. A pause. Yes, I'm hungry. Good, so am I. He started pulling out ingredients: preserved protein, dried vegetables, a container of grain. I'm not a great cook, but I can manage edible. Sit. This'll take about 20 minutes. Sera sat at the small table, watching him work with visible confusion. This wasn't following any pattern she knew. Contractors didn't cook for their labor assets. They didn't offer locked doors and privacy. They didn't ask questions and wait for honest answers. David worked efficiently, heating water, preparing a simple stew with the available ingredients. The smell filled the small space, savory, warm, more appealing than anything from the colony's cafeteria. Can I ask you something? Sera said. Yeah, what did you do before you came here? You said you saw what happens when people become numbers. Where? David stirred the pot, considering how much to share. Colonial Engineering Corps. I built infrastructure on frontier worlds, bridges, water systems, power grids, good work mostly. But sometimes the Corps got used by corporations or military interests to do things that weren't about infrastructure. Like what? Like designing systems specifically to keep populations dependent, installing backdoors in water treatment plants so they could be shut down remotely if a colony didn't comply with corporate demands, building refugee housing that doubled as detention centers. He ladled stew into 2 bowls. I spent 3 years doing work that looked humanitarian on paper but was really about control. And you left after I was ordered to design a mining facility with optimal labor efficiency protocols. I read the specifications and realized they were asking me to build a place where people would be worked to death as cheaply as possible. He set a bowl in front of her. So I refused, took a general discharge, and ended up here. Ironic, considering what this colony actually is. Sera looked at the bowl, steam rising from it. But you're still trying. Yeah, I'm still trying. She picked up her spoon and took a careful bite. The food was simple but warm and filling. She took another bite, then another, the careful restraint giving way to actual hunger. They ate in companionable silence. When Sera finished, she set her bowl down and met David's eyes. I don't trust you yet, she said bluntly, but I want to. That's more than I've felt in a long time. That's enough for now, David replied. Trust takes time. Time is something we have, 18 months of it. Then we'll use it well. David stood, collecting the bowls. You should rest. Tomorrow I'll show you around the colony, introduce you to the engineering work. We'll figure out a routine that doesn't involve you breaking your back in the mines. Sera stood slowly. David, yeah, thank you for seeing me on that platform, for stopping. You're welcome. She walked to the bedroom, pausing in the doorway. If this is real, if you really mean what you're saying, then I need you to know something. What's that? I'm going to fight to get myself back, all the parts I lost. And I'm not always going to be easy or grateful or convenient while I'm doing it. David smiled slightly. Good, I'd rather have someone fighting than someone broken. Sera nodded once, stepped into the room, and closed the door. A moment later, he heard the mechanical bolt slide home with a soft click. David cleaned up the dinner dishes, the sound of running water filling the quiet. Through the bedroom door, he heard nothing, no crying, no movement, just silence. Either Sera was sitting in shock or she'd collapsed into sleep the moment she hit the bed. He hoped it was the latter. He converted the couch into its bed configuration, pulled out spare blankets, and settled in for the night. The window showed stars beginning to appear in the darkening orange sky, different constellations than Earth's, but familiar in their distant constancy. Somewhere out there was Aranai Prime, Sera's homeworld. Somewhere else was Earth, his own origin point. And here, on this dusty mining colony, 2 people from different worlds had intersected because of a 5-credit transaction. David stared at the ceiling, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. The contract was legal, but what he was planning, treating Sera like a person instead of property, fighting to get her free, would raise questions if anyone looked too closely. But he'd faced worse consequences for doing the right thing. He could handle 18 months of complications. Part 2, Finding Rhythm. David woke to the smell of something burning. He sat up quickly, disoriented for a moment, then registered the acrid smell coming from the kitchenette. He scrambled off the couch bed to find Sera standing at the small stove, waving smoke away from a pan that contained what might have once been food, but was now charred beyond recognition. I was trying to cook breakfast, she said, sounding frustrated and embarrassed. I've watched others do it. I thought I understood the process. David opened the ventilation panel, clearing the smoke. Aranai don't cook. We do, but differently. Our traditional foods are prepared with chemical processes, not heat. I've eaten cooked food for years, but I've never actually made it. She looked at the ruined pan apologetically. I'm sorry, I wanted to contribute, to prove I could be useful. You don't need to prove anything. David took the pan, set it aside to cool, and you don't need to be useful. You're not here to earn your keep. Then why am I here? It was the question underneath all the others. David pulled out fresh ingredients. How about we make breakfast together? I'll teach you the basics. Sera hesitated, then nodded. Okay. They worked side by side in the small kitchen, David explaining each step, the right heat level, how to know when protein was cooked through, the timing for adding vegetables. Sera listened intently, her black eyes focused on each movement. Your people really don't use heat for food prep. David asked, cracking eggs into a pan. Not traditionally. We have a digestive enzyme that breaks down most organic matter raw, but we adapt to other species' food easily. She watched the eggs begin to solidify. On Aranai Prime, meals are more about the ritual than the nutrition. We sing while preparing food, infusing it with intention and connection. You said you'd forgotten how to sing. I've forgotten the sacred songs, but I remember the concept that food carries the energy of its preparation. She paused. What you're doing now, teaching me patiently, that's a kind of song. David hadn't thought of it that way, but he could see her point. Then let's make sure this meal has good energy. They finished cooking together eggs, reconstituted vegetables, bread toasted carefully this time. Sera set the table while David plated everything. When they sat down to eat, something felt different from the previous night, more balanced, like they were starting to find an equilibrium. I need to go to the engineering bay today, David said between bites. You can come with me or stay here, your choice. I'll come, I want to understand what you do. Fair warning, it's technical and boring. Boring sounds peaceful. After breakfast, they walked together through the colony. The morning shift was beginning, miners trudging toward the excavation sites, technicians heading to their stations, supervisors barking orders through comm units. Sera noticed several people staring at her, some curious, some suspicious. They're wondering why you contracted an Aranai, she said quietly. Let them wonder. The engineering bay was a large workshop filled with machinery in various states of disassembly. Hydraulic pumps, pressure regulators, filtration systems, all the equipment that kept the colony's water, air, and power flowing. David's workstation was in the corner, equipped with diagnostic computers and specialized tools. A younger engineer named Marcus looked up when they entered. Harrison, heard you did something weird at the auction yesterday. I contracted an assistant. Marcus looked at Sera with open skepticism. Since when do you need an assistant? Since the corporation doubled our maintenance quotas without increasing staff. David pulled up his work orders on screen. Sera, this is Marcus. Marcus, Sera, try to be less of an ass than usual. Marcus snorted but nodded at Sera. Can you read technical schematics? I can learn, Sera replied evenly. Good enough. He turned back to his work, the curiosity apparently satisfied. David spent the morning walking Sera through his work, explaining hydraulic systems, showing her how to read pressure gauges, teaching her to diagnose common failures. She absorbed the information quickly, asking intelligent questions, making connections he didn't have to spell out. You have mechanical aptitude, David observed after she correctly identified a failing seal from its pressure fluctuation pattern. Mining requires understanding machinery. I've just never been taught the theory behind it. She studied the schematic on screen. This is more interesting than breaking rocks. I imagine most things are more interesting than that. They worked through lunch, David occasionally conferring with Marcus on complex repairs. Sera stayed quiet but attentive, clearly filing away every piece of information. Late in the afternoon, a corporation supervisor entered the bay, a woman named Chen with sharp eyes and a tablet full of metrics. Harrison, progress report on the Western filtration system, running 30% above baseline efficiency after yesterday's repairs. Good, Chen's eyes moved to Sera. This your contracted labor, assistant engineer, yes, she doesn't look like she's doing much. She's learning, I'm training her on system diagnostics, long-term investment in efficiency. Chen made a note on her tablet. Fine, just make sure she's productive. Corporation doesn't pay for idle hands. After Chen left, Sera spoke quietly. She was testing you, seeing if you justify my presence in terms of productivity. Yeah, you did. I had to. The truth that I contracted you to get you away from mine work wouldn't go over well. Sera was quiet for a moment. You're protecting me by hiding your real motivation. Is that a problem? No, it's strategic. I appreciate strategy. She turned back to the schematic. Teach me more. If I'm going to be your cover story, I should actually be capable of the work. They continued into the evening. By the time David's shift ended, Sera had learned to identify 12 common failure points in hydraulic systems and could perform basic diagnostic tests. Walking back to quarters, David noticed Sera was less tense than she'd been that morning. Her stride was steadier, more confident. You did good work today, he said. I enjoyed it. Is that strange? Why would it be strange? Because enjoyment feels like a luxury I'm not supposed to have. David stopped walking. Sera, I need you to understand something. For the next 18 months, you're not in survival mode. You're not just enduring. You're allowed to enjoy things, to learn, to want things for yourself. That sounds like freedom. It's the closest we can get until we break that contract. She looked at him with those fathomless black eyes. You really believe we can break it? I know we can. Labor contracts have clauses. We just need to find the right one and exploit it legally. Have you found it yet? Not yet, but I will. That night, Sera cooked dinner, a simple meal but edible and unburned. Progress. They ate while David explained the colony charter's labor provisions, looking for loopholes they could use. Here, David said, highlighting a section on his datapad. Contracted labor can petition for early release if they can demonstrate the contract was signed under duress or if circumstances have materially changed. My circumstances were always duress. That won't work. No, but material change might. If we can document that you've developed specialized skills that make you more valuable as a free contractor than as bonded labor, the corporation would just bind me to a higher value contract. David frowned. She was right. Okay, different approach. Personal hardship clause. If the contracted person has dependents or family requiring their presence, I have no family. The debt that sold me was my sister's. She died in a mining accident 4 years ago. I've been paying it off ever since. David set the datapad down. I'm sorry, don't be. She's free now. I'm still here. Sera stood, walking to the window. Sometimes I think dying would be simpler than this. Hey, David stood too but didn't approach. Don't go there. Why not? What's the point of fighting for 18 months just to end up in another contract after? The point is that things can change. You're not the same person you were yesterday. You learned things today. You cooked dinner. You're starting to remember what it feels like to be more than just labor. And when the 18 months are up, we'll figure something out. We have time. Sera turned from the window. You keep saying we, like you're bound to this too. I am. The moment I contracted you, I made myself responsible for what happens next. I don't take that lightly. She moved closer, studying his face in the dim light. You're either the best human I've ever met or the most elaborate liar. Time will tell which. Yes. She reached out, hesitated, then placed one four-fingered hand on his forearm. The touch was brief but deliberate. Thank you for today, for teaching me instead of using me. That's the baseline of decent behavior, Sera, not something to thank me for. In my experience, baseline decency is rare. She withdrew her hand. Good night, David. Good night. She went to her room, closing the door but not locking it this time. Another small sign of growing trust. David settled onto his couch bed, pulling up legal databases on his datapad. Somewhere in the thousands of pages of corporate labor law, there had to be a path to freedom. He just had to find it, and he would, because walking away from Sera now wasn't an option he could live with. Part 3, cracks in the system. 2 weeks passed in steady rhythm. David worked his engineering shifts while Sera learned alongside him, proving herself capable enough that even skeptical Marcus admitted she had decent instincts for someone with no formal training. Evenings were spent researching legal precedents, cooking increasingly ambitious meals, and talking about their worlds, their pasts, the futures they wanted. David learned that Sera's people saw colors in spectrums humans couldn't perceive, that their concept of music was tied to mathematics in ways that hurt his brain to contemplate, that she'd once wanted to be a stellar cartographer before debt made such dreams impossible. Sera learned that David had a younger sister on Earth he hadn't spoken to in 2 years, that he'd built his first engine at age 12, that he still had nightmares about the refugee housing project he'd helped design that became a prison. They were learning each other. Building something that felt like friendship, though underneath ran currents neither acknowledged yet. On the 15th day, everything changed. David was deep in a repair when his comm unit chirped. Harrison, report to Administrator Voss's office immediately. Marcus looked up from his workstation. That's never good. David glanced at Sera, who'd gone very still. Stay here, I'll handle this. No, she stood. If this is about me, I should be there. Sera, I'm not hiding, not anymore. They walked together to the administration building, a squat structure at the colony's center. Administrator Voss was a career corporate bureaucrat, middle-aged, colorless, the kind of person who saw everything through spreadsheets. His office was sterile and climate-controlled, unlike the rest of the colony. Voss sat behind a large desk, his face showing polite disinterest. Mr. Harrison and the Aranai. Not bothering with Sera's name, sit, they sat. David kept his posture relaxed but alert. Voss pulled up data on his screen. I've been reviewing your work assignments. Your maintenance productivity has increased 12% since contracting your labor asset. Assistant, David corrected. I contracted an assistant, not an asset. The legal terminology is contracted labor, but terminology aside, there's a problem. Voss turned the screen to show them. Your assistant is generating value beyond her contracted labor category. David had been waiting for this. She's skilled. I'm utilizing those skills, which puts her in a higher value bracket. The corporation is prepared to reclassify her contract from general labor to specialized technical support. New term, 36 months instead of 18. New valuation, 50 credits instead of 5. Sera's hand clenched on the armrest. That's not legal, David said carefully. Contract reclassification requires the contracted party's consent. Actually, Section 42, Subsection 9 allows reclassification without consent if the contracted party has materially misrepresented their capabilities at initial binding. David's mind raced. Sera didn't misrepresent anything. She was categorized as general labor by the auction house, not by her own claims. Irrelevant, the capability exists, therefore the higher value contract applies. Voss smiled without warmth. Unless you'd like to contest this through corporate arbitration, though I should mention that process typically takes 18 months. During which time she'd remain in the general labor pool. The threat was clear, fight this and Sera goes back to the mines while the legal process crawls forward. Sera spoke for the first time. What if I refuse to do specialized work? Voss looked at her like she was a malfunctioning piece of equipment. Then you'd be in breach of contract. Penalties include extended service time or transfer to penal labor assignments. This is extortion, David said flatly. This is business. The corporation has invested in this colony's infrastructure. We're entitled to optimize our labor assets. Voss pulled up another document. However, there is an alternative. What alternative? Transfer her contract to corporate direct supervision. We have specialized facilities that can better utilize her technical capabilities. You'd be compensated the 50 credit differential, of course. David felt cold. Specialized facilities was corporate speak for places where contracted labor was used until they broke. Sera would disappear into that system and never emerge. No, David said, I'm sorry. No, we're not transferring the contract, and we're not accepting the reclassification. Voss's eyes narrowed. Then we proceed to arbitration, and she returns to general labor pool immediately. Actually, a new voice said from the doorway, you don't. David turned to see an older woman enter, tall, gray-haired, wearing the insignia of interplanetary labor oversight. Her name badge read Inspector Margarettorres. Voss stood quickly. Inspector, this is unexpected. That's the point of surprise inspections, Administrator. Torres moved to stand beside David and Sera. I've been monitoring this colony's labor practices for 3 weeks. This conversation is exactly the kind of irregularity I'm here to document. There's no irregularity. We're simply attempting to retroactively change contract terms without proper consent, threatening penal reassignment to discourage legal challenges, and misapplying Section 42(9), which explicitly excludes situations where initial categorization was performed by licensed auctioneers. Torres smiled coldly. Should I continue? Voss sat down heavily. The corporation has rights, so do contracted laborers, including the right not to have their terms arbitrarily changed. Torres pulled out her own datapad. Mr. Harrison, Miss Sera, I'm placing a legal hold on this contract pending full review. During that review period, estimated at 30 days, the original terms remain in effect and no changes can be made without my office's approval. David felt tension. He hadn't realized he was holding release slightly. Thank you, Inspector. Don't thank me yet. The review could uphold the corporation's position if their argument has merit. She looked at Sera directly, but it will be an actual legal review, not administrative coercion. Outside Voss's office, Tors walked with them toward the residential sector. I don't understand, Sera said. Why are you helping us? I'm not helping you, I'm doing my job. Tors stopped at a quieter section of pathway. But off the record, I've seen what happens when corporations like Meridian treat people like inventory. It's why I took this position. Someone needs to push back. What happens after the 30-day review? David asked. Depends what we find. If I can document systematic abuse of contract terms, I can recommend sanctions against the colony, maybe even mandate early release for improperly classified laborers. She looked at Sera. But I'll need your cooperation. Full deposition about your contract history, every detail from initial signing through your current situation. That could take days, Sera said. 3 days, actually, starting tomorrow. Tors handed David her contact information. Bring her to my temporary office at 800, and Mr. Harrison, keep doing what you're doing. The fact that you're treating her like a person instead of property makes my case stronger. She walked away, leaving them standing in the orange-tinted afternoon. Sera released a long breath. That was terrifying and hopeful in equal measure. David finished. Yes. They walked back to quarters in silence, both processing what had just happened. Inside, David poured water for both of them while Sera stood at the window, her purple-blue skin reflecting the fading light. I thought this was over, she said quietly. I thought I'd found a safe pocket of time before the next disaster, but they just keep finding ways to take more. That's what makes Inspector Tors different. She's not trying to take, she's trying to prevent it. David handed her the water. This might actually work, Sera. And if it doesn't, if the review upholds their reclassification, then we fight it, file appeals, make noise. I know people in interplanetary media who'd love to cover corporate labor abuse stories. She turned to him, something fierce in her black eyes. You do that. Risk your position, your career, to fight for someone you barely know. I know you well enough, and yeah, I'd do that. Sera moved closer, close enough that David could see the subtle shimmer in her skin. Bioluminescence, he realized, a feature of Aranai biology he'd read about but never seen. Why? I keep asking that question, and your answers never quite explain it. David set his water down. Because when I was 23, I watched a corporate security team round up refugees we'd built housing for. They loaded them onto transports that were supposed to take them to resettlement camps. I found out later those transports went to labor colonies instead. Over 1,000 people, including children, sold into contract work because they'd become inconvenient. And you did nothing, no judgment in her voice, just question. I did nothing, David confirmed, the old shame still sharp. I told myself it wasn't my responsibility, that I was just an engineer. That speaking up would cost me everything. He met her eyes. It ate at me for years, so when I saw you on that platform, I saw a chance to be the person I should have been then. That's a lot of weight to put on one 5-credit contract. Maybe, but it's my weight to carry. Sera reached out, taking both his hands in hers. The touch was warm, her four-fingered grip strong. Then carry it with me, not for me, with me. Yeah. I can do that. They stood like that for a long moment, hands joined, something shifting between them that neither named yet. I should prepare for tomorrow, Sera said finally, not releasing his hands. The deposition will bring up things I've tried to forget. Do you want help? Or space, help, talk to me about something else, anything else. They sat together on the couch, and David told her about Earth, real stories, not the sanitized versions in corporate materials. He told her about his sister's rebellion against their engineer parents, about the ancient cities that still stood despite centuries of climate change, about the ocean he'd grown up near, and the way sunrise looked over water. Sera listened, asking questions, letting the stories pull her away from tomorrow's fears. Eventually she fell asleep there, her head drooping onto his shoulder. David didn't move. He sat still, letting her rest, watching the stars appear through the window. Tomorrow they'd face the deposition. In 30 days they'd face the review results. But tonight Sera slept without nightmares, and that felt like a victory worth protecting. Part 4, Truth and Testimony. The deposition took 3 days, just as Tors had promised. Each morning David and Sera walked to the inspector's temporary office, a converted storage room with basic recording equipment and uncomfortable chairs. Each morning Tors asked questions. Each morning Sera answered. David sat in the corner, present but silent, there only to provide support. Tors' questions were thorough and sometimes brutal. She made Sera recount every detail of her sister's death, the debt that followed, the first contract, the second, the auction that led to the third. She asked about living conditions in contractor housing, about meal quality, about medical care. She asked about injuries, about punishments, about the small humiliations that didn't show up on official records. Sera answered everything, her voice steady but her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles went pale. On the third day, Tors asked, "Why didn't you report these conditions before? To whom?" Sera's laugh was bitter. "The corporation runs the colony. The contractors work for the corporation. The legal office is funded by the corporation. Who would I report to?" "Fair point." Tors made notes. "One final question, Mr. Harrison's treatment of you, has it deviated from standard contractor protocols in any way that concerns you?" Sera looked at David across the room. "Yes." David's heart sank. "Explain," Tors said. "He treats me like a person. He asks my opinion. He teaches me instead of using me. He gave me a locked door and never asks what happens behind it." Sera's voice strengthened. "That concerns me because it makes me angry at how abnormal basic decency has become." Tors smiled slightly. "Noted, we're done here." Outside in the colony's pale sunshine, Sera sagged against the building's exterior wall. "That was harder than breaking rocks." "You did amazingly," David said. "I told a stranger everything. My failures, my sister's death, the ways I've been broken and diminished. That's not amazing, that's just desperate." "No. That's brave, there's a difference." Sera pushed off the wall. "I need to move, to do something physical before I crawl out of my skin. Come with me." David led her away from the residential sector, out toward the colony's edge where the terraforming equipment stood silent. Beyond the last structures, the landscape was raw Kepler 186f, red rock, strange crystalline formations, and thin atmosphere. "We need breathing masks beyond this point," David said, pulling two from his pack. They walked into the wilderness, following a path David had discovered months ago. 20 minutes from the colony, they reached an overlook, a cliff edge with a view of the entire valley, the mountains beyond, and the colony sprawling between. "This is where I come when I need to remember there's more than machinery and quotas," David said. Sera stood at the edge, the wind pulling at her white braid. "It's beautiful, harsh but beautiful, like you." She turned, surprised. David hadn't meant to say that aloud. "Sorry, that was true." Sera moved closer. "David, I need to tell you something." "Okay." "I'm attracted to you. I have been since the second week. Maybe since the first time you asked me what I wanted instead of telling me what I'd do." She held his gaze. "But I don't know if that's real attraction or trauma bonding or gratitude manifesting as something else." David's heart was pounding. "What do you want it to be?" "Real. I want it to be real." Her four-fingered hand touched his face. "But I don't trust my own feelings right now. How can I when everything in my life has been controlled or manipulated? So we wait until you trust yourself again. And if that takes months, years, then it takes that long. I'm not going anywhere, Sera." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. They stood like that, breathing the same thin air, the colony small and distant behind them. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not pushing. Thank you for being honest." They stayed on the overlook until the sun began setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that matched Sera's shifting skin. Walking back, their hands found each other, fingers intertwining. Not romance, not yet, just connection. That night, Sera knocked on David's door, the converted couch bed where he'd slept for 3 weeks. "Can I stay out here tonight?" she asked. "I don't want to be alone with my thoughts." "Of course." She curled up on one end of the couch while David took the other. They talked late into the night, about the deposition, about Tor's investigation, about what might happen next. Eventually, Sera's words slowed, her breathing deepened. David grabbed a blanket and draped it over her, then settled into the armchair nearby. When he woke in the morning, Sera was watching him. "You didn't have to sleep in the chair," she said. "You needed the couch. We could have shared." "Sera, I know, we're waiting. But I want you to know that when I'm ready, I'm choosing you. Not because you freed me or helped me or any of that, because of who you are." She sat up, blanket pooling around her waist. "You're the first person in years who's made me want to be myself again." David's throat tightened. "You're making it really hard to be patient." "Good, patient is boring." They both laughed, the tension breaking. The remaining weeks of Tor's review passed in a blur of work, waiting, and growing closer. Sera continued learning engineering, becoming skilled enough that Marcus started actually asking her opinion on repairs. David continued researching legal precedents, building backup plans in case Tor's review went badly. Evenings were spent cooking together, talking, occasionally falling asleep on the same couch with careful space maintained between them. On day 28 of the review period, Torres requested a meeting with both of them. They sat in her office, now more organized after a month of occupation. Torres looked tired but satisfied. "I'm submitting my final report tomorrow," she said. "Thought you should know what it contains." "Bad news?" David asked. "Mixed news. The good. I've documented systematic violations of labor protocols across this entire colony. Contract manipulation, inadequate housing, insufficient medical care, improper categorization. The corporation is facing significant fines and mandated reforms." "And the bad?" Sera asked. "Individual contracts are harder to break than systemic problems. Your specific contract, Sera, was technically legal at signing. The manipulation came later when they tried to reclassify. I can prevent that reclassification, but I can't automatically void the original 18-month term." Sera's shoulders dropped. "However," Torres continued, "there is a provision for early release if the contracted laborer can demonstrate they've acquired skills, making them more valuable as free contractors than bonded labor. And you, Sera, have documentation showing substantial skill development under Mr. Harrison's supervision." "So she'd be free?" David asked. "She'd be free to seek employment as a licensed technician. With her documented skills, she'd be an attractive hire for any corporation." Torres paused, including this one, ironically. Meridian would probably offer her a standard employment contract at decent wages. Sera was quiet for a long moment. "What about David's contract for me? Doesn't someone need to buy out the remaining months, already covered?" "Part of the corporate fine structure includes a fund for early releases in cases of documented skill development. The corporation, in effect, buys you out of your own contract." Torres smiled. "Poetic justice. How long until this is official?" David asked. "My report goes to the Interplanetary Labor Board tomorrow. They'll review for 10 days, then issue orders, so approximately 2 weeks until Sera is legally free." After they left Torres' office, Sera walked in silence back to quarters. Inside, she paced the small living space like a caged animal. 2 weeks, she said finally. 2 weeks and I'll be free, actually free. "Yeah, David, I don't know how to be free. I've been contracted or in debt since I was 20 years old. I'm 31 now, 11 years of being property." She turned to him. "What if I don't remember how to be a person?" "You already are a person. You've been one the whole time. You know what I mean." He did. "Then we figure it out together. You won't be alone in this. You keep saying that. But in 2 weeks your obligation to me ends. Why would you stay?" "Because I want to, not out of obligation. Because somewhere between that auction platform and now, you became important to me." Sera crossed the room in 3 strides and kissed him. David froze for a startled second, then responded, his hands coming up to cup her face. She made a soft sound, relief or need or both, and pressed closer. They broke apart after a long moment, both breathing hard. "Was that okay?" Sera asked. "That was very okay. Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I've been sure for weeks. I was just scared to trust my own feelings. But David, 2 weeks from now I'll be free. And I want to make that choice, choosing you from a place of freedom, not bondage." "Then we wait 2 weeks. Why?" "I'm choosing you now, because I need to know that when we do this, there's no legal complication, no power imbalance, no question about whether you're really choosing or just surviving." David kissed her forehead. 2 weeks, then we start fresh, equal partners." Sera looked frustrated but nodded. "Fine, but I'm holding you to that. I'm counting on it." Those 2 weeks were both endless and too fast. They worked together, ate together, fell asleep together on the couch with carefully maintained boundaries that were becoming harder to justify. On day 14, Torres called them to her office one final time. "It's official," she said, handing Sera a data chip. "Your contract is voided effective immediately. You're a free citizen with full labor rights." Sera took the chip like it was made of glass. "That's it, I just walk out of here." "You walk out of here. Though I should mention Meridian has already extended a job offer. Standard employment contract, technical specialist grade 3, decent salary. It's on the chip if you want to review it." "What if I don't want to work for Meridian?" "Then you find other employment. Galaxy's a big place." Torres smiled. "You're free, Sera, genuinely free. That means the choice is entirely yours." Outside, in the orange sunlight, Sera turned to David. "I'm free," she said, wonder in her voice. "Actually free." "Yeah, you are. So now what?" David took her hand. "Now you decide what you want. No pressure, no obligations, just your choice." Sera looked at their joined hands, then at the colony around them, then at David's face. "I want to stay on Kepler 186F, take the Meridian job, show them I'm more valuable free than contracted, save money, build a real life." She stepped closer. And I want to build it with you if you still want that. I absolutely want that. Then take me home, David, our home. They walked back to the quarters that had become theirs. Inside, Sera set the date a chip down and turned to David. No more waiting, she said firmly. No more waiting, he agreed. She kissed him again, deeper this time, 11 years of being diminished transforming into determination to reclaim herself. David responded with equal intensity, weeks of careful restraint dissolving. They moved to the bedroom, the one Sera had claimed but both had avoided sharing. Tonight, that changed. Sera's fingers worked at David's shirt while he traced the bioluminescent patterns on her skin that had become more pronounced with her emotions. They undressed each other slowly, learning each other's bodies with reverence and growing urgency. Tell me if anything feels wrong, David said. Tell me if I'm too much, Sera countered. They came together with honesty and heat, taking time to discover what pleased, what worked, what made the other gasp. Sera was confident in her desires, guiding his hands, showing him the sensitive places along her neck and shoulders where her bioluminescence was brightest. David was patient and attentive, listening to her responses, building pleasure with careful precision. Afterward they lay tangled together, Sera's white hair spread across his chest, her skin still glowing faintly in the dim room. That was worth waiting for, she said. Yeah, no regrets, only that we didn't do this sooner. She propped herself up to look at him. We did it at exactly the right time, when I could choose it freely. David traced one of the patterns on her shoulder. What now? Now we sleep. Tomorrow I accept that job offer. Next week I find my own place, something small, something mine. Your own place. David, I need that. I need to know I can stand alone before I choose to stand with someone. She kissed him softly. But I'll be choosing to stand with you. Just let me prove to myself I can be independent first. He understood. How long? A few months, maybe 6, long enough to remember who Sera is when she's not someone's contracted labor or someone's project. She smiled. You can visit, frequently. I will. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and built something real through patience, honesty, and genuine care. Epilogue. 6 months later, Sera's apartment was small, one room with a kitchenette and separate bathroom, but it was hers. She decorated it with things that mattered, star charts on the walls, a collection of mechanical parts she was restoring as art, a window box where she was attempting to grow earth herbs David had given her. She stood in her doorway watching David climb the stairs to her level, carrying groceries for the dinner they'd planned. You're early, she called, wanted to help cook. He kissed her as he entered, familiar and comfortable. I'm actually competent now, no more burned offerings. I remember. Last week's dinner was excellent. They cooked together in the tiny kitchen, moving around each other with practiced ease. 6 months of dating, real dating, with choices and autonomy and mutual respect, had built something solid. Over dinner, David asked, have you thought more about the stellar cartography program? Sera had been accepted to a training course on the orbital station, learning the profession she'd wanted before debt derailed her life. I start in 2 months, which means I'll be gone for 18 weeks. That's a long time. Yes, she took his hand. But I need to do this, not for us, for me. I know, and when I come back I want to talk about moving in together, not because it's convenient or economical, but because we choose it. David smiled. I'd like that. They cleaned up dinner, then sat together on Sera's small couch, her white hair flowing loose over his shoulder. Do you ever think about that day? She asked. The auction. Sometimes. I think about it all the time. How close I came to disappearing into the corporate system, how a 5-credit decision changed everything. For both of us, do you regret it? The complications, the legal battles, all of it. David turned to kiss her forehead. Never. You were worth every complication. Sera's skin shimmered with bioluminescence, the physical manifestation of deep emotion. I'm proud of who I'm becoming, the parts I got back and the new parts I'm discovering. I'm proud of you too, and I'm grateful, not because you saved me. I'm tired of that narrative. But because you saw me when I couldn't see myself. You were always there, Sera, you just needed space to remember. She kissed him then, slow and deep, pulling him closer. Later, lying together in her narrow bed, Sera spoke into the darkness. I love you. I need you to know that, not love born from gratitude or trauma bonding, real love, the kind I choose every day. I love you too, and I choose you right back. Outside, Kepler 186f's orange sun was rising over the red mountains. In the colony below, the morning shift was beginning. Miners heading to excavation sites, technicians like David heading to engineering bays, free contractors like Sera preparing for another day of work she'd chosen. And in this small apartment, two people from different worlds lay wrapped together, having built something real from 5 credits and one human's decision that some things were worth more than profit margins. Freedom, dignity, love freely given, the best things were always worth fighting for. End.